please don't forget to subscribe, because a lot of people that watch my videos don't subscribe apparently, and hit that bell so you stay informed with the latest and greatest videos from this channel. I'm also live every day on twitch.tv/HasanAbi after 11 a.m. Pacific.
Investigators naming a suspect overnight and confirming that the man died in that blast.
Overnight, federal agents naming a suspect in that investigation into the powerful explosion that rocked Nashville early Christmas morning.
Anthony Warner is the man believed to be responsible for this horrible crime.
Investigators also looking into Warner's psychiatric and medical history for clues and trying to determine whether the AT&T building where the RV was parked was his intended target. Multiple law enforcement sources told ABC News investigators are seriously exploring whether Warner may have been motivated, at least in part, by a paranoia over 5G cellular technology.
Brother, when I look at an act of terror that is to cause commotion being perpetrated, the first thing I look to is to make sure that if he is a terrorist or if the person has a mental disability, mental health problem, if you will. Did he have a troubled past? Now, the only way that you can figure this out, brother, is by knowing how Caucasian this person is. The importance here, the important part of this process is to figure out how Caucasian they are. Stephen Paddock, not a terrorist. Caucasian. This guy here, Caucasian, not a terrorist, of course. Troubled background. That's what I think always. That dude at the Parkland school, he's white enough and a Trump supporter, doubly not a terrorist, folks. Of course. There is no such thing as stochastic terror, and that it's only terror if it's perpetrated by a brown guy. The best question to ask in this circumstance is he a terrorist or is he a troubled man? I.e., is he a terrorist or Caucasian? No other ands, ifs, or buts. Don't you think it's better to use terrorism less often than expanding the label? I agree. That is actually what I'm going to be talking about in a second, once I'm done making fun of the obvious contradictions. Oh, Zernev Sarkov, or however you say his fucking last name, literally Caucasian? Yes, but he's a Muslim, which of course immediately overrides being white. If you're a Muslim man, that means you're not white. You're no longer white. I mean, dude, literally. You know how many fucking people still send me messages like, you fucking muzzrat, go back to your fucking country, you piece of shit? Or you know how many fucking white people get triggered when I say, like, I'm white? Why do you think that those people get mad when I say I'm white? Why, oh, why do you think that some people get very agitated when someone who looks very white says that they're white, who has fucking pale ass skin? I wonder why that's the reason. Because if you're a Muslim man, you're not white, brother. That's freaking white. That's white, brother.
This investigation is not over. The FBI is still in control of the scene just behind me here as they search for answers and clues, but they still don't have a motive. And they are asking the public for help. Anyone with information, they want them to come forward.
This is colloquially an act of terror. Like, this is literally what you would consider to be an act of terror. Is my argument to say, like, no, we got to start calling white people terrorists too, and that's the better way to do it? No, of course not. I'm trying to describe to you guys that terrorism is a political designation created by the fucking American government, okay? Specifically so they can justify an expansion of surveillance state powers and expansion of cruelty. That's it. That is the only reason why people use terrorist as a designation. That's it. That is the only reason. That's why there is this designation between, like, you know, black and brown people being very easily considered terrorists, whereas like white supremacy and white supremacist acts are freedom of speech. They're protected by freedom of speech. The Black Panther Party does not get the same level of free speech protections that the KKK does, because one's a terror organization, the other is white. My argument isn't necessarily to expand the definition of terror. My argument is to limit the definition of terror and all that comes along with it, and try to analyze the material conditions in which crime and even what you recognize as terrorism is created. Which is why I talk about the radicalization of, like, you know, teenagers that fucking join ISIS all the goddamn time whenever I'm talking about terror and why it fucking exists in the Middle East, and even pushes into Europe, and even in some instances the United States of America. Why do I always talk about the background and the material conditions that create a ripe ground for terrorist radicalization? Is it because of some fucking ideology, because of a book that they read? No, I'm not some fucking moron like Sam Harris. I obviously understand why terrorism or these sorts of acts of violence occur. It's not happening because they read the Boogeyman book, and the Boogeyman book told them like, oh no, it's good to fucking blow up buildings. It's because of underlying material conditions. So are they not saying it's terrorism? I think part of the reason why they're not considering, some media is not considering this to be an act of terror, despite the fact that, like, if he was Muslim, they would have fucking reached that conclusion easily and quickly and swiftly. And that's not the right thing to do, by the way. That's the wrong thing to do regardless, is because when it's a white person, they are more understanding. We do not approach white people as a monolith. And that's a good thing. It's not a bad thing that we don't approach white people as a monolith. We don't run around saying like all whites are pedophiles because they are overrepresented in the pool of pedophilia. And, you know, all whites are fucking school shooters because they are overrepresented in the field of school shooting. You don't say that because you understand that white people are by definition, the in-group, the dominating class, or the dominating identity in the identity pool in the hierarchy. That's literally what whiteness is. It is a concept built upon exclusion. And oftentimes there are more people that get accepted into the pool of whites and therefore become a part of the dominating in pool. The only people who will never be white are black people. That's it. You're saying the media is not being completely sensationalist because the guy who did it is white? Yes. And I think the media should not be this level of sensationalist when the people who do this sort of stuff are brown or Muslim either. And the same fucking concepts exist for all of the weirdo anti-SJW sick freaks that would get so goddamn mad when like people were trying to, in a really shitty way, try to like talk about fucking terrorists that are of like a Muslim or Arabic descent or origin. Those guys they lost their minds for years on that distinction not being applied correctly, brother. They're Muslims, so they're doing terrorism. Like, why are you running to defend them? It's not a defense. Remember, the only reason why they're not doing it is because this dude is white. So there are, however, certain attacks of white supremacist terror that the designation applies to, just like certain attacks by fucking ISIS or stochastic terrorism that the designation applies to. The application of the term should not be a justification for limiting people's rights, limiting everyone's rights, and targeted surveillance. I think the wrong thing here is to want the same kind of poor treatment for white people that brown people have gotten, especially if you're a brown person yourself or a black person yourself. It's obvious the man did it as an attack on the local government. He did it because they probably fucked him over or something financially. I think that the placement of the RV is good. I think the placement of the RV is indicative. Why did I say good? Indicative of what his interests were. No, the good part about it is that there was only property damage and no like human casualties, with the exception of the person who died. So the argument here isn't to like expand the surveillance state to like white people, but there should be surveillance powers or the same apparatus that's been like used in the past to fucking solve crimes or to prevent terror to some degree should absolutely be focused on white supremacy, even though it never is. Oh, the Unabomber sent bombs to kill multiple people, yet people like Joe Rogan said he had a good manifesto. Could you imagine if Ilhan Omar said Bin Laden had some good ideas? We see white terrorists just as people with different ideas. Yeah, exactly. No, he's right. That Dono is actually correct. Except Ilhan Omar does not think that like Bin Laden had good ideas, for the record. Think about the way that people fucking regard 9/11 even to this day, when there's like 9/11 happening every fucking 3 days as a consequence of COVID, but it's due to, you know, the Trump administration's incompetence. So like people don't give a fuck. Whereas like even, you know, 8/21/2019, a streamer said some shit about fucking 9/11 and it fucking reached as broad of an audience as possible. Why? Because people are still fucking, it was a perfect narrative. Muslim fucking leftist streamer saying something that is not in support of 9/11, but saying something that can be easily misconstrued as 9/11. Oh, by the way, the purposeful designation of terrorism being wielded as a tool by institutions of power and control is so that they can necessitate imperialism. Call brown people terrorists. You say terrorists are like unique and different, actually, and very different than like other random acts of violence. So yeah, we have to fucking deal with them. We have to torture them. As long as I call you a terrorist, I can torture you. As long as I can call you a terrorist, I can extrajudicially lock you up for the rest of your fucking life in Guantanamo Bay. As long as I can call you a terrorist, I can justify going to your home and fucking killing your family. And this is very real. This is the real reason why when you say terrorists, no one fucking thinks of like white people. They think of fucking brown people and Muslims specifically. See, isn't it also because terrorism sort of derives from the Middle East? No, bitch. The fuck do you mean terrorism derives from the Middle East? What? What is terror then? Like, unless you are literally saying like terrorism is when, you know, Arabs or Muslims fucking blow themselves up, and the more Arab they are, the more terrorist it is, which is my point. That is literally what the fucking the current understanding of terrorism is. You can't fucking say that. Like, the reason why you have weekends is a consequence of terrorism in literally the way that you would understand it. The reason why you have weekends, the reason why you don't have child labor is a consequence of terrorism. All acts of violence that were created in an effort to advance a political agenda or cause a commotion could technically be featured as terrorism. Non-state acts of violence, non-state actors perpetrating violence. So that's terrorism. The American government originally was created by terrorists. That's terror. Terrorism is also, even state actors technically do terrorism all the fucking time. You attribute in-group to country or race, but it's literally just ideology. No, ideology is a factor as well. The ALF are a terrorist organization despite being mostly white and American because of their ideology. Certainly. Ideology is a factor in it as well. But that's why I said, like, when you're Muslim, it's you're automatic terrorist and you're automatically non-white. There are certain instances where your ideology is immediately more important in your distinction or designation as a terrorist. My take on this is that, like, I'm not trying to expand the surveillance state, and I'm not trying to fucking, like, I'm not gonna sit and like cry too much about, you know, white people not being classified as terrorists. So more so than driving home the point that, like, brown people should be treated in a similar way and not as like a monolithic group of non-humans who operate on pure ideology and bloodlust. Having said that, though, I think we do need to shift our resources to white supremacist acts of terror as well, considering the fact that it's one that we can tackle with ease. It's not as fucking complicated as like Islamist radicalization or Islamist fundamentalists utilizing Islam to radicalize people overseas that are coming from backgrounds where their material conditions are completely fucking fucked as a consequence of American imperialism. And I do think that, like, you know, Life After Hate and other organizations that focus on de-radicalizing Nazis are a key part of this.